Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. Veterans Day, and like every Veterans Day or every holiday that we're supposed to honor the sacrifice of those who served, the service and the sacrifice of those of our fellow Americans who, I hope one day we will actually figure out a way to help instead of have PR stunts and platitudes. On these days, I like to remind folks that we have far too many homeless veterans. We have too many veterans struggling with demons brought on by the pursuits of our battles. In fact, I was just having a conversation with a friend who spent more than 20 years in the military. He says, on these days, he stays home because he's tired of the empty thank yous and the hollow promises of action. And this is, again, our political class who's allowed these days to, they come, they do the photo ops, and then we leave things behind. And for me, these are what those days are about. These days are about honoring service, yes, but committing to saying, you know what, if we push people into these situations, we got to take care of them. So in that vein, the hope is that we contact our representatives and we follow through. I mean, it's nice to say thank you. It's nice to respect and honor, but it's also, I think it's important to do. And I guess I'm stuck on this because, of the era that I grew up in. I remember, my memory of that heavy army green coat was of people with horribly, broken bodies, minds, drug and alcohol problems, just being dumped back into our housing projects. So on these days, I'm a little bit in that weird, sensitive world of we should be doing something as opposed to another photo op, another PR stunt. So that's where we're at. Thank you for your service, and let's figure out how to solve some of those problems. A good part of it would be, I don't know, getting a soft infrastructure bill pushed through so that we can help take care of folks, revive our social safety net. A lot of our problems would be solved if we had a less than tattered social safety net, which is what Biden's Build Back Better plan is kind of trying to move us back towards, having something of a net under people's feet. Under their feet. And I'm struggling in this place because I got beat up pretty good yesterday after saying during one of the segments that I don't think we're getting anything. And I'm going to stick to that. I don't think there's going to be anything that gets through the Senate. I know the week of the 15th there's supposed to be a vote. I know that they've promised to go forward on this. It doesn't mean that Joe Manchin's going to vote for it. And for me, Joe Manchin is the stick in this mud. Joe Manchin is the guy who is going to gum this whole system up for one reason or another. Right now, it's the inflation. Manchin's hot on the inflation. Inflation's too high. It's killing our economy. No, inflation is a problem right now because we've got a gummed up system. We find out that other countries, their inflationary problems are much worse than ours, because their systems are just as gummed up. And this is where you go, we work through this stuff, but you don't stop investing in the future. You don't stop doing the things that need to be done. Now, Manchin is going to say, and I already know where this is going, and this was my position before everyone's, no, you're a Debbie Downer, no, you're a pessimist. And yeah, maybe. But I'm also a realist in that Joe Manchin has been telling us all summer long that he's not interested in passing anything on the social infrastructure side. He's not interested in doing it. He's not going to do it. And you're not going to push him into it. And the more that you push, the more he's going to go, no, like any child. And this is where we are. So that what did he call it? A strategic pause. That's what he's going to continue to push, and we're going to get nothing on the social side until at the earliest next year, and I doubt even then. The bipartisan infrastructure bill was something that we got, and I was surprised we got it, because I thought there would be more progressives who would say, no, we're not voting for this unless we get this. The progressives did surrender to Manchin's will. They did surrender to the needs of the country. They did put the needs of the country first, while leaving many of their constituents in kind of in the lurch. And this is where we're at. And I look at this statement by Joe Manchin today, and again, I am somebody who believes that we reward good companies who do good things. We reward union workers. We reward companies that allow their workers to join and form unions. But Joe Manchin, Joe Manchin says, no. He's against the idea of the provision in the 1.75 social spending plan that would give a tax incentive to people who buy electric vehicles, but give a little bit more to the ones that are made in the U.S. by union labor. He came out and said it's wrong. The extra credit is wrong. And it's not who we are as a country. No, it is who we are as a country. We reward people doing the right thing. Now, where did he say these things at? Well, he said it at a Toyota plant outside of Buffalo, West Virginia. And yes, there is a Buffalo, West Virginia. Again, you've got another Japanese auto plant, vehemently anti-union, does everything they can possibly do to keep workers from organizing. And this is just another one of those things. Now, understand, Manchin is the key vote in the Senate, and this could, basically chuck this whole thing. This is another piece that Manchin is pulling out of what could be a plan to rebuild the working class of this country. By giving American companies a leg up in rebuilding their manufacturing base, and giving companies who reward their workers loyalty and their dedication, by taking that out, now you're putting the companies at a disadvantage. This is who Joe Biden is. This is who Joe Manchin is. And I'm in this spot where you go, I hate to be right, and I hate to be right on this, but this was predictable from the beginning. Manchin was always going to be the fly in the ointment. He was always going to be the difficult part of this. And the more we go down this path, the worse this is going to get. Be happy we got the infrastructure bill. That's a good thing. Evidently, I guess in another day or so, we're going to find whoever is going to be his Joe Biden's top infrastructure guy. He's going to appoint an infrastructure chief, or a czar, if you will. I think you need somebody who's going to oversee it. I find it interesting that it might not be Kamala Harris, which I would have thought naturally that would have been the position for her, and we'll find out. But this is a big deal for this administration. Getting this money out quickly, getting these projects moving quickly is a big deal. The thing that happened to Obama in 2009, when you got the stimulus money, the recovery money, the rescue money, however you want to put that, it didn't get out fast enough. There weren't enough shovel-ready projects that everyone believed were on the shelf ready to go. There weren't enough to get people into jobs quick enough. I think Biden has a little bit more time than we had then. The economy is doing well. We have some inflationary issues that have to be dealt with, and they will be when the supply chain figures itself out, and that's going to take time. You don't just stop the entire system and then flip the switch and everything goes right back to normal. That doesn't happen. It's going to take time to work through a system that, understand, was fragile to begin with. We had a country on just-in-time inventory. We have a country who had no reserves. because business was like, nope, we can, we can ship things, next day, we can have it here tomorrow. Problem is, you can't do that anymore. And what is infuriating to me is I hear people go, well, it's all these, there aren't enough truck drivers. We need to move to automated vehicles. No, there are enough truck drivers. And there'd be more if you paid them well. There would be much more if they had the kind of wages and benefits they had back in the 70s. Back before you saw the Motor Carrier Act that Carter signed into law, and Reagan really put the pedal to the metal and destroying that industry. Truck drivers back in the 70s made probably 50% more than they're making right now. Those were solid blue-collar jobs with solid wages and benefits and all of that. And now you're basically back to sweatshop on wheels, even with the bump in this moment. And we're at this juncture where we can undo some of the damage of the last 45 years. We can undo some of the horrible things of Reaganomics. We can undo some of the neoliberalism of the 70s and 80s. We can undo that and rebuild what was the most prosperous economy for working people in the history of civilization. We can do that. But it takes policy, and it takes people who are going to, the fact that Joe Manchin has come out against union jobs from a union state like West Virginia, I think speaks volumes. And we're in this weird kind of space that, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that this money gets out the door and we see the economic boost. Unemployment goes down a little bit more. I mean, it's in pretty good shape right now. But it's got to be visible. Also today, I want to get to the Rittenhouse trial. Anybody been paying attention to this? I don't know how you can't. It's been plastered all over the place. The fake tears. And look, if it's me, I'm sitting in that thing. I'm going to probably try and play to the jury's heartstrings as well. I personally think he's going to walk, but the judge has been really interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But as I said the other day, my fear in this, and some of the responses that you've sent my way, is you're worried about this too, that this may be the new normal. Every time we're going to have a protest, every time there's going to be a gathering, every time there's going to be an argument, is it going to come to, is this the Wild West, or what we imagine the Wild West to have been? And I keep coming back to why this kid would be coming, to Kenosha, Wisconsin from Illinois, cross state lines illegally with a firearm that he wasn't supposed to have, under the guise of somehow going to, like I said the other day, clean graffiti off of churches. Is that what we're to believe? It's an unbelievable tale. And it's one of these moments where you go, as a society, is this the direction we want? We're going down the wrong paths. And when they ask that question, do you think the country's going down the right or wrong path? I think economically, I think we're on a good path. Morally, I question. When you have, and this is what's incredible to me, I had religious people, who, the evangelical kind coming after me, going, he did the right thing. I'm going, no, he killed two people. And this idea, he was defending himself. No, he interjected himself into a situation he should have never been in. I had someone say, he's kind of like George Zimmerman, and I go, in a slight way, yeah. We don't give people a pass for this stuff, do we? And this is where I'm really concerned for the future, because we see all these polls where 39% of people think that violence is coming, and that there's I know a guy who's got rice and guns buried all over the region because he's ready for the next civil war. Is this where we want to go? All because we've got a handful of people who have fetishized gun ownership, and Well, something that a 17-year-old kid with this idea that he's going to be the savior basically deputizes himself and puts himself in this situation. I don't know which way the verdict is going to go, but the way it appears, at least the way the judge has been acting, it appears that this kid's going to walk. Now, will his life be forever ruined? Probably, because those two families, the three families, the two that the people who were killed and the one who was shot, they're going to probably sue him for everything he's ever going to have. But we're not going to hear that tale. All we see is the images of him partying with white supremacists in a bar at 18 illegally. All we are going to hear are the gun fetish messages. I sure hope we're a better country than this. I sure hope that we figure this out. And I sure hope that at some point we turn away from politicians who keep pushing this. The Paul Gosars of the world end up out of Congress. But as long as you got people in the halls of power who are coming up with anime videos of killing, Congress members and the president and people who are minimizing a 17-year-old kid showing up at a riot with an AR-15 because he's now going to be the law. I don't know. We're in the wrong places. And also the police department there, who I don't know what. Most of the cops that I've talked to over the years don't want that, but it appeared in those videos they were okay with it. And it comes back to, is this the country we want? Because we're at a crossroads. We're in a moment. And this is where our elected leaders had better figure out how far you're going to let people go. Because, there's that old adage, you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. This kid took a couple miles. Anyway, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you check out our podcasts. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you sign up for the podcast. Have it with you all the time. Make sure also you sign up for our app. Take the program on the go everywhere where you go. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Renato Mariotti is going to be here to share some thoughts on the trial. Maybe get some thoughts on the insurrection, subpoenas. Lots and lots to get to. Quick break, right back. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day members of the industrial workers of the world began a free speech fight in Spokane, Washington. Wobblies often intersected seasonal workers through street corner soapboxing. Many towns and cities worked to resist IWW organizing efforts by passing ordinances against such rallies. Wobblies challenged these repressive tactics. They would descend on a town or city in great numbers, forcing mass arrests that overwhelmed local authorities and judicial systems. At Spokane, the organizing campaign began a year earlier. Wobblies mobilized against local employment agencies that charged workers fees for jobs that didn't exist. The campaign was so popular that the IWW was able to establish a union hall, hold meetings and lectures, and establish a newspaper. The Spokane City Council quickly passed an ordinance against street corner rallies. When Wobblies learned that religious groups were exempt from the restrictive ordinance, they announced November 2nd as Free Speech Day in Spokane. They put out the call, wanted men to fill the jails of Spokane. By the end of the month, as many as 500 had been arrested. The War Department even offered up nearby Fort Wright to handle the glut of prisoners. A young Elizabeth Gurley Flynn arrived in Spokane to soapbox. Efforts to arrest her were briefly frustrated after she chained herself to a nearby lamppost. Flynn made good use of her time in jail. She reported on appalling prison conditions and accused the local sheriff of operating a brothel out of the women's prison section. The free speech fight gained nationwide attention and enjoyed wide public support. By March, all prisoners were released, the ordinance had been rescinded, and employment agencies' license revoked. the IWW won big.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, interesting day in the Rittenhouse trial. One of those questions of, what exactly is this judge doing? It's kind of crazy that this guy is, I don't know. At one point, it was almost like he was trying to testify. Very bizarre. But like anything, you deal with these judges. They've all got their quirks and their weird personalities. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on this trial. And again, as I've been saying, I think this kid's gonna walk, but we'll find out. I've asked my good friend Renato Mariotti to come talk with us. Renato is a former federal prosecutor. Also, he is the host of the On Topic podcast, one of the fantastic podcasts out there. You can get just about anywhere you get your podcast. Renato, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely, Rick. Anytime.
So, what do you make of this? I mean, I'm watching this case. I think we all are watching this case of this Kyle Rittenhouse and this judge. What do you make of what's going on there?
Wow, a lot of things. I mean, first of all, I think the prosecution has made a lot of big mistakes in this trial. They put up, they ended up putting their case, charging their case in a fashion where they had to rely on people like the Daily Caller video guy as their witnesses. When you're putting up right wingers as your own witnesses in a trial like this, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
They charged some counts that they probably shouldn't have. There's that video where we don't even know the victim's name. The guy who was lunging at him probably could have stuck to their strongest counts. And they've also, while I think there's a good reason to be critical of the judge, some of his decisions, at other times, the prosecution was doing things that are head scratchers, right? Referring to the defendant's silence. For example, it's an absolute no-no for a prosecutor. One point, they seemed like they were violating his prior ruling. Just sloppy mistakes that understandably are going to get a judge upset. There are times, to me, also it just seemed like they're unprepared, didn't have their notes with them to cross Rittenhouse. They didn't. It didn't seem like they believed their own case at times. So definitely disappointing there, but also, frankly, part of the issue is also the Wisconsin law is very, 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 very favorable to self-defense, affirmative defenses. I mean, basically the prosecution's burden here is extremely high. So I think part of this is also, a combination of bad law, bad prosecution in terms of the strategy there, and then also some questionable calls by the judge.
Yeah, and it's a rough situation, but one that I keep coming back to. Who in their right mind allows their 17-year-old to go across state lines with an AR-15 to get in the middle of where a position that is going to have violence? It's just there's just, for me, so many problems before the incident ever happens.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think that's the best thing the prosecution has for them in this case is, this kid's looking for trouble. I mean, who drives from, I'm not that far from Antioch, Illinois. You're driving all the way from Antioch, Illinois up to Kenosha with an assault rifle and 30 rounds of ammunition, into a spot where there are protests. They call them riots. Well, if people are rioting, in another state, driving up there with an assault weapon is just asking for trouble. So on its face, this kid has some problems. And it really is interesting to me. I will say, just as a trial lawyer, it's been interesting to me how this trial has developed. One thing I hope that your listeners can glean from this is that sometimes trials can be a bubble, whereas we're all sitting in a home saying, like, how the heck can you let this guy off? He drove all this way with an assault weapon to kill people. And the trial, when you watch it, it's like focus on these minute details of what he feared at a precise moment. It's very interesting.
No, I said from the beginning, I think he's going to walk on the majority of charges. In fact, the curfew violation is not even one that they can get him for now because that got thrown out. I said, ultimately, I think he's going to, on the right, he's going to be viewed as a hero, and he's going to need it because he's probably going to get sued in civil court many times over, and that's probably where any justice, if there is any, will probably happen in my view.
I think that's right. Frankly, I think I think this should hopefully cause us to take a step back and think about open carry laws and how those are how we regulate guns in this country.
Yep.
Because I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today who practices before this judge regularly, who's in this area of Wisconsin, and he was telling me that he's like, look, down in the Chicago area, I get that you guys don't have people walking around with assault weapons, but up in Kenosha, carrying an assault weapon around is not that going to be regarded as that unusual, that crazy. It's regarded as this is just lawfully what people do around here. And I have to say that that's not a good thing for our country, that people are walking around with assault rifle weapons like that. And frankly, it's intimidating other residents. And I think that was his purpose, was to intimidate people.
Absolutely. And as the question that I keep coming back to is, outside of what happens in the trial is this the kind of society we want? That every time there's an argument, every time there's a riot, if you will, that now we're going to have to start shooting people. If I get into an argument in the supermarket parking lot with somebody, do I have to shoot them out of fear that they're going to shoot me first? Is this the world that we want? Is this the country we want?
Yeah, it's lawless. It's literally the reason we have laws, is so that we aren't resolving issues in this manner. And it's interesting to me, of course, Republicans had been this party of law enforcement for such a long time, and now we have them championing vigilantes who are essentially taking matters into their own hands, driving to hot spots with assault weapons, presumably to intimidate or worse, gun down people who are engaged in activities that they don't like.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now I want to move across the country over to Georgia. The Arbery case not getting as much attention. At least I don't think it is. At least not on my pages. And I think probably that's because the two defendants are probably going to go to jail for a long time.
I think that's right. I mean, that's because it's going the way people expect it to go. You got a guy who's out jogging. And these guys, their defense in this situation, it doesn't look very good. And the prosecution, I think, set the right tone from the beginning.
Yeah. So good. Glad to see that going to happen. Now I want to get your thoughts on the subpoenas. Another 10 subpoenas came out this week. Stephen Miller, McEnany, a number of other Trump folks. We've already got the 6, I guess the 11. There are a bunch of subpoenas out there. Do any of these people see the inside of a hearing room?
Yeah, I mean, I think they will. One good sign actually today, Rick, is that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, while they stayed the district judge's ruling, they set a very aggressive argument schedule. So by the end of the month, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the federal court of appeals here, and frankly, it's a panel of 2 Obama appointees and a Biden appointee, are going to hear the issue that was just decided recently regarding Trump's suit to block production of records. I think that'll be some helpful precedent. And then as to this issue, I think they will, but frankly, I do think that this is going to take some time to get to court, or alternatively, you're going to have a situation. I know some Meadows, some of the others have been negotiating with the committee. To the extent that any of them negotiate with the committee, you could imagine very curtailed testimony. I worry that the committee will not finish its work before a new Congress takes over in 2023, January 2023, which could potentially be controlled by the Republicans.
Yeah, and that's where my mind comes back to this position of they're already rewriting the narrative of what happened on January 6th. If they do get control of this body, then they just rewrite the actual history. Because some of the stuff that we're hearing coming out, like for instance, that Mike Pence and his security details, their badges and their access cards were all not working the day of January 6th, which led them onto a loading dock somewhere in a parking garage. Kind of makes me go, I don't know. There seems to be something going on here that if I'm Mike Pence, I got to tell you, I want to know why my access card didn't work.
Well, if you or I've thought about this recently. What would you or I have done if we were Mike Pence and you're in a situation where you're hunkering down, hiding for your life, and the president of the United States is criticizing you as a coward for refusing to overthrow our constitutional system of government? I mean, you or I, Rick, would have stood up after that and would have called on the party to remove him from your own party to remove him from office. But we're not. That's why we didn't serve in the Trump administration. Why we weren't elected along with Trump, because that's not the man Mike Pence is. The reason that Mike Pence got to that position is because Mike Pence is who he is, somebody who was willing to be, a kowtow to Donald Trump and go along with whatever Donald Trump said. And in this one instance where he wasn't willing to do something so patently not only unlawful but antithetical to our constitutional order, he paid a deep price for it.
Yeah. Now, of all the names on there, who do you want to see? I mean, obviously Steve Bannon being at the top of that list, but there are a number of interesting characters. Stephen Miller, for instance, is somebody that I would love to see under oath having to testify, even though I know they're all going to take the fifth. Anyone that you're particularly interested in?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have to say, I would love to have Kayleigh McEnany actually having to answer questions for a change, and swearing an oath to tell the truth. I don't know if she could do that. I saw her tell falsehoods to the press for so long that it would be interesting to have her face some tough questions.
Yeah, it's one of those. She was one of those people who'd lie when the truth had been better. No,
exactly.
No, we're in this weird kind of moment where everything legal seems to be up on its head, and some of the folks that I've talked to are they fear that our legal system is badly broken from the Supreme Court all the way down. Is it as bad as it seems, or is it just that maybe we're paying attention to the wrong stuff?
It's interesting. I think it has always been the case that people could take their time responding to subpoenas and inquiries. People could game the system to a certain extent that sometimes prosecutors screw up in trials. They were talking about the Rittenhouse trials. These things do happen in our system, but I think because we've had stress in our system in other pieces of our government, that people were relying, I think, on the legal system to do more than it's really able to do or is designed to do. And I think people are relying on the legal system to save us from Donald Trump, to save us from this basically scourge on our democratic system. And ultimately, I think, Rick, we all have to get off our butts and work our hardest to save ourselves, because I don't think the legal system's going to do it for us. Yeah.
Now for me, there was that 2-page memo on how to overthrow our elections by this attorney Eastman. There's when I talk to conservatives about that, there are folks who don't believe that is real. And this is one of those weird kind of moments where we live in alternative universes where we're arguing over what is fact and what isn't fact. And someone like Eastman having to testify for me is like an absolute must, just to verify that yes, he did produce this document.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting. I'm sure you saw that video, candid video that was taken surreptitiously of him basically bragging about it and saying that Mike Pence didn't have the guts to go along with his, superb analysis. And I think, that's what he says in private, and then publicly he backtracks. I have to say, this whole issue of what is truth is a real, and the fact that we can't agree on a set of facts is a real problem for me, Rick, because I have a lot of people in my family who have been deceived, that have bought into the Trump ideology, and talking to them about the world and what's going on is exasperating, because they just don't live in the same universe you and I do. And it's a problem, because even if you have a commission or a committee that puts out a report, they're just going to spin it however they want, just the way they did with the Mueller report, or the way they did with the Senate committees came up with reports. Even the majority report about the Russia investigation was actually pretty damning for Trump, but the tweets and the sound bites were very different than that. And I think Unfortunately, we live in a world where falsehoods that are repeated can sometimes drown out facts and reality.
Yeah. Any chance of speeding up this process? Because look, the January 6th commission should have started on January 6th. We should be much further down the road at this point. Because as I've been saying, look, if it's you or if it's me, they subpoena me, they're going to drag me in and throw me in a chair. I don't see how our elites get to blow this off for years and years and end up never having to testify, even if they just sit there and say, I plead the fifth.
It's interesting. I will tell you, as somebody who is a lawyer representing folks, that there certainly are ways that people do drag these things out. You'd be surprised. But I will, in my mind, this commission, you call it a commission. It's really a committee, right? And that to me it was limited and problematic from the start, because the way this should have been, it should have been a commission like the 9/11 commission. This should have been, so unanimously, not bipartisan, it should have been nonpartisan. This should have been something, an episode, tragedy in American history like 9/11 that was universally looked at in horror. And instead, we have half this country, or a third or fourth of it, that is denying that it really occurred, denying who was behind it. And now you have a committee that is certainly bipartisan. I'm not suggesting that, people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger aren't Republicans, but nonetheless, this portion, this party, the Republican Party, is fighting tooth and nail, against that committee, working cross purposes to it, trying to delay, trying to obstruct. And the end result is going to be, as you have discussed, this dual reality, because of course they'll spin no matter what that committee ends up finding.
I mean, we're in this weird world where infrastructure is communism now, and the 13 Republicans who had the audacity to say, no, I would like better roads in my neighborhood, somehow they're traitors to the cause. We are in such weird times. But Renato, I appreciate the time, the expertise. Thanks for your thoughts.
Anytime.
As always, good stuff. Our good friend Renato Mariotti. Make sure you check out his On Topic podcast in all the places that you get your podcasts. One of the folks that I look to on all legal issues. Love to hear your thoughts. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1887. That was the day that 4 men were hung in Chicago for their alleged role in the bombing at a labor rally at the city's Haymarket Square a year earlier. 8 men were put on trial. Although the prosecution did not prove any of the men had ties to the bombing, 5 were sentenced to die. Louis Ling died in jail before the execution could take place. The others were martyred for their support of the labor movement and the fight for the 8-hour day. 3 of those executed were born in Germany. August Spies and Adolf Fischer worked for a Chicago German-language workers' newspaper. George Engel owned a toy store. Backlash against foreign-born anarchists helped stoke public hysteria over Haymarket. The final martyr was Southern-born Albert Parsons, the editor of The Alarm, an English-language workers' paper. The day after they died, the Chicago Tribune reported on the brutality of their execution, writing, quote, "Then begins a scene of horror that freezes the blood. The loosely adjusted nooses remain behind the left ear and do not slip to the back of the neck. Not a single neck is broken, and the horrors of a death by strangulation begin." Thousands of mourners joined the funeral procession of the 5 slain men. In 1893, Governor John Peter Altgeld granted the 3 defendants still in jail a full pardon. The monument to the Haymarket 8 stands at Forest Home Cemetery, just west of Chicago, drawing visitors from across the world to remember these martyrs for the 8-hour movement. May Day is celebrated as the workers' holiday around the world in commemoration of the events in Chicago. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I love seeing when groups come together, especially when the cause is to take on corporate America. Take on the criminals at the very top of our corporate structure. You know, the big ones, the monopolistic types, the Amazons, the Googles, the behemoths. I love the David Goliath stories, especially when David's taken down Amazon and those folks. And as I understand, this week, a new group organized in New York City, a new statewide coalition of groups under the heading of New Yorkers for a Fair Economy. And their goal to hold corporate America accountable. And here to talk about this new coalition and what the aims and the goals are, I've asked my good friend Pat Garofalo to come talk with us. Pat is the author of the Billionaire Boondoggle, How Our Politicians Let Corporations and Bigwigs Steal Our Money and Jobs. He's also the Director of State and Local Policy for American Economic Liberties Project. Pat, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks so much. It's always great to be here.
So this is good news. Good news. Finally, somebody going to do something to take on corporate America.
I hope so. Yeah, it's a really great group of small and medium-sized businesses, labor unions, including the Teamsters and the RWDSU, New York-based organizations like Align and New York Communities for Change, and a few national organizations like my own shop, the American Economic Liberties Project and the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And the goal is to take on corporate power in New York State. And step one is to pass a bill called the 21st Century Antitrust Act, which actually passed the state Senate last session in June. And when the new legislative session starts in January, we want to take another run at it, make sure it gets through not just the Senate, not just the Assembly, but gets on the governor's desk and that she signs it.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, you know, I've been talking for a long time of going, you know, who's the next Teddy Roosevelt? Who's the one who's going to be the trust buster and come break up some of these monopolies like Amazon? And, you know, this is how it starts, right?
Absolutely. And this is actually an outgrowth of the Amazon HQ2 movement in New York, which was a huge win for the community there to look at a deal that was going to cost them hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to get a new Amazon facility. And the community rose up and the elected leaders there and they said, no, we're not going to do this. And so that's really where this started. But it's totally clear that antitrust law is not functioning the way it should be. If it were, we wouldn't have Facebook and Amazon and Google in their current form. And two, that states have a lot of power here. And while they're messing around in Washington and, you know, sometimes talking about doing antitrust reform, sometimes not, the states can step up and do it themselves. And if this bill were to actually get through, and I should shout out its sponsors, Senator Mike Gianaris in the state Senate and Assemblyman Dinowitz in the New York State Assembly, if they actually get this done, it would be the most important antitrust reform in a generation. It's a huge, huge deal.
No, and stuff I hope New Yorkers get around, because if you can stop it there, maybe it spreads to other parts of the country and we begin holding corporate power in check. Because look, I mean, I look at a company like Amazon, the outweighted power that they have in our economy is not good. You know, if you're a capitalist, and I have a lot of friends who they're dyed-in-the-wool capitalists, monopolies are the end of capitalism. So if you really want to believe in your core principles, you got to take on monopolistic threats.
Absolutely. And I mean, to your first point, that's already happening. The California Assembly passed a resolution to study this New York bill, to have their law commission study it to see if it would be appropriate for California. I think it would be, and they should absolutely do it. And that's the idea, is for New York to set a standard here for other states, for the federal government to really come out and say, we're not going to take this anymore. We don't have to. And to your second point, you're absolutely right. Antitrust law used to be the thing that kept corporations in check, but over the last 50, 60 years, we've allowed it to wither on the vine. We've allowed a lot of bad court precedent to just lie around, a lot of corporate judges to decide that big is great and, you know, efficiencies that lead to layoffs are good for somebody. And so we've wound up in the space where we are today. And that's what this New York bill is trying to fix.
Yeah, no, again, you hit on something I think is important, because I have a lot of friends who go, you know, Amazon just does it really, really well. And if you can't compete, you get eaten up. And, you know, Amazon's success is because they do something so well. And look, they do anti-competitive things very well. They're very good at gaming the system. They're very good at crushing the mom and pops. And if we want to have an economy where mom and pops got a chance, I think you do have to have some rules in place to take on this massive power. I just don't know where else you go with that.
Yeah, 100%. This Amazon is not competing fairly. They own the platform and compete on it. It's the team that's playing in the game also having the umpire on their side. They're allowed to do whatever they want in their marketplace, rank their stuff first, push small businesses down in the rankings for no reason. They've had their distribution system built out by state and local taxpayers to the tune of $4 billion. And yes, you heard that right, $4 billion in state and local taxpayer funds have gone into Amazon's warehousing and distribution network. And then they use that publicly built network as a cudgel against small businesses to extract fees. So this is not fair competition on Amazon's part. And this is what the bill is setting out to change. Because right now, antitrust law as it stands, you can't really take on Amazon. Folks are trying. Carl Racine, the Washington, D.C. Attorney General, has launched a really innovative lawsuit against Amazon. And I hope it goes well. And I think their argument is solid. But it's pretty clear to me that Amazon shouldn't exist in its current form. And if antitrust law is actually up to snuff, it wouldn't.
And what would that look like? Because I've got friends who, they're like, well, it's so easy, it's convenient. This is the wave of the future. We're going to have, these giant corporations give us the things that we need. How do you break this up? I mean, how do you go and undo what has been done over these years?
Well, look, for one thing, the dirty secret at the heart of Amazon is that its retail platform is subsidized by everything else, right? So you don't need to have Amazon Web Services and Amazon TV and Amazon Film attached to the online retail platform, right? Like there's no connection between those things other than the fact that this giant corporation owns them all. But the other thing is that Amazon built a really great retail platform. That's fine. That doesn't mean they then get to use all of the information that they glean from that platform to compete against the other companies and the small businesses and the small mom and pop retailers that are on there, because that's what they do, right? They watch, they mine everyone's data, they see what's going really well, and then they steal it and counterfeit it and copy it and bury the people who actually had the good idea. And I think that's actually a really important point. Monopolies kill innovation. Monopolies are terrible for having new ideas and new products come forward, because if you're not actually having to compete, then you get lazy and you don't continue to create new things. And a company like Amazon doesn't actually have to do that.
That's an excellent point. But, I get people who all the time who are like, they're innovating. They're doing things better. They're customer focused. Listen to Jeff Bezos. He'll tell you how customer focused they are. I order something on my phone and it's on the porch. Why would you want to disrupt that? Why do you want to ruin my shopping experience, Pat?
And I don't think that has to go away, right? Like there's something to be said for providing that service. But again, that doesn't have to be attached to a massive web services company, a massive movie making company, a massive, home gadgets company. And the way that they leverage all those other things to unfairly compete on the retail platform is a real problem.
Now, obviously, Amazon is the big behemoth in the room, but you're also looking at like Facebook and Walmart and Apple and Google and all of these other giant corporations who have been allowed to grow, incredibly large over the last couple of decades. How do you unravel that?
I think just by doing it, right? Like if you look at Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, you can spin those off and the whole thing would probably be more valuable. And that's actually a point I need to circle back to Amazon for a second, because one really innovative thing that the New York bill does is that it puts workers back into the heart of antitrust law. And what I mean by that is that technically under antitrust law, using your power to abuse workers to force restrictive contracts on them, like non-competes or no poaches, or to use your power to lower wages across the labor market is illegal, but it never, ever, ever, ever gets prosecuted. This bill in New York explicitly says that if you are a dominant employer, meaning that you have 30% of the labor market in a particular commuting area, you can't use any of those restrictive contracts. You can't use non-competes. You can't make no poach agreements. You can't use non-disclosure agreements. You can't do the sort of things that really, really harm workers, but that you are explicitly open to antitrust scrutiny. Because again, we're talking about Amazon here, right? And we're focusing all on the consumer side. They're cheaper, they're fast. There's a real worker harm issue here, right? I'm sure you've talked about over and over the horror stories that come out of these warehouses. Part of the reason they're able to do things so fast is because they're putting that on the backs of overworked, abused warehouse workers who can't even go to the bathroom, right? So this bill puts into law that you can't do those sorts of things too.
No, that's fabulous, and these are the things that these are the kind of policies and the kind of laws that we need in place to protect workers and consumers. So how do we help move this along, and how do we get this in other states?
Yeah, if you are in New York, if you are a New Yorker, contact your assembly member. As I said, last session it passed the state Senate, didn't get through the state assembly. A lot of that I think was just timing. It passed the state Senate at the 11th and a half hour. I think there were 2 days left in the session when it passed. So get on the phone with your folks in the assembly, tell them that this is important and that it needs to be on the radar and that it needs to happen. And if you're in other states, call up your state senator, call up your state rep. They're not used to hearing from people. A few phone calls to someone who works in a state house can make a huge, huge, huge difference. Tell them to look at this bill. Tell them they need to do something about corporate power. Tell them that this is a real reform. And look, one of the things we hear about this all the time is that it's like radical, wacky, left-wing, crazy stuff. No one knows what this is. It's going to be horrible. The whole economy is going to. This is a standard that this New York bill sets that exists in lots of other places in the world. It exists across Europe. It's in Israel. It's not like some wacky, crazy thing. It's just better than what we have allowed American antitrust law to become, which is pretty much worthless.
Right. You bring up that you're being accused of being a left, wacky, liberal kind of whatever. Conservatives should tie on to this as well, because if you really are a capitalist, monopolies are the last thing you want in a capitalist system, because as you said, if you have a behemoth in the room, they're gonna stifle all innovation, stifle all competition, and that's supposedly what I'm told by my conservative friends that they believe in. A core tenet of their ideology is that competition that's being snuffed out.
100%. That's why the coalition is called New Yorkers for a Fair Economy. This isn't about, trying to rig the rules in any one particular direction. It's about trying to set a playing field so that the small business with a great idea can actually compete and doesn't get stuffed by a giant gatekeeper like Apple or like Google or like Facebook. The number of stories that we hear every day from folks who have good ideas and have great small companies, but literally cannot access customers or markets because they've run into one of these big 4 or 5 tech firms. It happens all the time. We hear it every day.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of what Facebook, did with that robotic video that Zuckerberg did recently, talking about Meta, how they're going to break up? It's no longer going to be just about Facebook. Aren't they kind of already doing what you're talking about and spinning off kind of, or am I missing what the Meta plan was?
I'm not sure anybody really understands what the Meta plan was, but you bring up an important point. Breaking up companies, again, it's one of those things that you talk about it, and because of a concerted effort amongst mostly conservatives, but honestly some liberals too, breaking up companies sounds like wacky and never is and can't be done, and won't that be terrible? Companies have been broken up all the time. Companies break themselves up all the time. General Electric just broke itself up.
Right.
We broke up Ma Bell. We put a ton of antitrust rules onto Microsoft. The only reason Google exists is because of the big antitrust ruling against Microsoft back in the 1990s. This is done all the time. Historically, America has actually been pretty good on antitrust and on ensuring that there isn't a giant behemoth dominating every market. It's only been in the last 50, 60 years that we've gotten away from that. And so bills like the 21st Century Antitrust Act will bring that spirit back.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot all about Microsoft. They were the dominant, everything on every computer sold, and because of the antitrust laws. Mm-hmm. Now there is that competition, and you're right, it did spur innovation and new entrants into the game, so to speak. And it actually was a good thing. And I remember living through Ma Bell being broken up. I remember party lines, and I remember, paying through the nose for long distance. Now you don't get a long distance bill anymore. Mm-hmm. So technology this sounds like a great idea if we can do that.
Absolutely. I mean, again, we were talking about Facebook, right? There's no reason that you can't spin WhatsApp and Instagram off. Those mergers never should have been allowed in the first place. And if you get more competition in that space, you will see a better product, I think. Part of the reason that Facebook is what it is, the disgusting, awful disinformation, conspiracy theory machine, is because there's really no one else in that space. And anyone that does pop up, they just gobble up and either, put into the board or shut down.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a point where I get to where I wish I wish we would stop giving these big companies money. You said that, we've given Amazon, what, $4.5 billion?
Oh yeah.
What happened to, businesses making decisions based on location and on business needs and on their vision, not how deep they can jam their hand into our pockets?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot, and this is what I wrote about in the book, right? Over the same sort of 50, 60-year time frame where antitrust law was just put on the shelf and allowed to collect a bunch of dust, corporations and corporate leaders, and honestly, too many elected officials told this story about the best way to develop a local economy is to throw a bunch of money at a big corporation and hope it comes to town and do good things, when in actuality, it's completely the opposite, right? And you know that, and I'm sure most of your listeners know that. Build it up from the bottom, support people, make a place a great place to live and to do business, and then the jobs and the companies and the small businesses and the entrepreneurship will follow. But we've been sold a bill of goods for 60 years that you have to do it the other way. You have to do it top down, and it's nonsense.
Yeah, I've said for years, I would love to see the federal government get involved in breaking up these big behemoths, and whenever companies do the kind of things like Amazon, where they get huge amounts of state tax dollars, I wish the feds would have a mechanism to claw some of that back, because this beggar thy neighbor economic development that we see that's created these behemoths. That's a big part of this as well. I mean, there's so much that has to be undone. It seems like such a daunting task.
Yeah, and you know what, honestly, I think we've talked about this before. The federal government could come in tomorrow and say that, state and local corporate subsidies are functionally illegal. I don't think that's going to happen. But a far more promising effort, I think, is states banding together to say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. A few years ago, Kansas and Missouri got together and said, hey, we're going to stop poaching companies from each other with tax breaks because this is getting ridiculous. You literally had companies moving across the state line exactly, in the Kansas City metro area, back and forth, collecting all these subsidies. So they finally made a pact to knock that off. There's another effort to take that idea national. I think it's really important.
No, that's what we knew. The bill is the 21st Century Antitrust Act. We'll make sure we get links out on social media how people can take a look at it. And if you're in New York, make sure you contact your senators or your assembly people and say we need to move this forward. It'd be a great first step. Pat, I appreciate the time. As always, look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend, Pat Garofalo. Again, the book, you got to get the book. That's first. The Billionaire Boondoggle, how our politicians let corporations and bigwigs steal our money and jobs. And also, again, the 21st Century Antitrust Act. Make sure you're pushing that. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1887. That was a tragic day for the labor movement. 4 men were hung in Chicago for their alleged role in the bombing at a labor rally at the city's Haymarket Square a year earlier. In a sensational trial, a total of 8 men were convicted for Haymarket. Although the trial had not proven any of the men had any ties to the bombing, 5 were sentenced to die. 1 died in jail before the execution could take place. The others were martyred for their support of the labor movement and the fight for the 8-hour workday. 2 of the men were German-born August Spies and Adolf Fischer, who had worked at Arbeiter Zeitung, a Chicago German-language pro-worker newspaper. A third was Albert Parsons, a Southern-born anarchist and the editor of the working people's English-language newspaper, The Alarm. The 4th was George Engel, a German-born labor activist and owner of a toy store. Neither Parsons nor Engel were even present at Haymarket during the time of the bombing. Before he was executed, Albert Parsons declared, "Let the voice of the people be heard." August Spies shouted, "The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today." In 1893, a Haymarket Martyrs monument was commemorated at the Forest Home Cemetery just outside of Chicago. Carved at the base is August Spies' declaration. That same year, the governor of Illinois pardoned the remaining 3 Haymarket prisoners. 7 of the 8 men who were convicted of the Haymarket affair are buried at the cemetery, along with many other progressive activists who wanted to be interned alongside the martyrs. Each year, visitors from around the world visit the cemetery to pay their respects to these heroic men. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
At least since the invention of the wheel, people have fixed, tinkered with, and improved every device they've possessed. It's been a human right. But after several thousand years, suddenly legal clauses are being tucked in purchase agreements saying that today's owners of products must not even peek, much less poke inside, the inner workings of our devices. Makers of anything with a computer chip in it, everything from your car to your toothbrush, have been especially vehement about this, rewriting human nature by outlawing our right to repair. Yes, they assert, you own the thing, but we own the intangible ideas that make it work. So if the product malfunctions, you must return it to us and pay us a premium to repair it. Plus, they prattle, you could hurt yourself trying to do it yourself, so trust us. Bovine excrement, barks Steve Wozniak. Companies inhibit your rights so they can have power, control over everything. Is he some consumer radical? No, Wozniak is the co-founder of Apple, the multi-billion-dollar global Goliath that is the world's biggest producer of consumer electronics. He's appalled that Apple has now become a fierce opponent of self-repair. He says we wouldn't have had an Apple, except that early innovators like him grew up in a very open technology world. From the start, he points out, openness helps spread innovation and consumer demand. So, why stop the self-repair community, he asks? 2 big reasons. Besides letting corporations lock in monopoly profits from the repair industry, it also dissuades customers from bothering with repairs. Just throw the thing away and buy a new one. This is Jim Hightower saying, if you wonder where such massive, deadly levels of pollution by lead, mercury, plastic, etc. come from, look to the gross throwaway ethic of big tech profiteers like Apple. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm still stuck on Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin and his, inflation's bad. Sorry, we can't do anything about your social safety net stuff. Sorry, those kids can't get pre-K, and no, we can't get Granny new hearing aids. Nope, sorry. Inflation. And then the other slap in the face. While at a Toyota plant saying, no, we're against giving union workers a little leg up in the electric vehicle fight. No, that's not who we are. Would someone, no, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say someone should slap him. But I wish his mother would have slapped him a couple of times. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on where we are, where we're going, and all of the craziness we're seeing coming out of D.C. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah is a fantastic reporter over at RawStory. Make sure you check out her work, rawstory.com. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, happy Thursday.
So inflation, Sarah. We can't help Granny get some new chompers. No hearing aids. No pre-K. No child care. None of that stuff because inflation.
Oh my God. So here's the thing about the whole inflation thing. We literally shut down the country last year. Like that was a big deal. That totally screwed up everything. Which is why the United States is not the only country in the world who's dealing with inflation right now. We just got numbers out today that showed that Germany and China are both dealing with 30% inflation. And it's not like, we're not trying. There's a ton of ships that are coming in that are trying to unload goods. There aren't enough people to help unload all of the ships because there are so many of the ships. And you were telling me that they've got trucks backed up desperately trying to fill things and get things out as fast as they can.
Yep. They need containers to put on the trucks.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that Biden talked about is that he's going to try and find a solution to that. But at the same time, he's also a little bit concerned that there's some price gouging and some people sort of playing, in on some of this to get some more cash. And so I think he said he was going to try and make sure that that wasn't happening. But again, like this whole idea that somehow, this is some democratic problem, or that spending, federal spending has caused this, is just completely wrong and misguided. But it doesn't surprise me from Joe Manchin. Like he has sort of adopted this Ronald Reagan idea of, we don't want to have any social programs for anybody, and you're basically just left to your own devices because trickle down economics works. And it's like, no, Joe, it doesn't. It really doesn't. We've seen it several times now.
Now, I did have someone explain to me that by having additional spending, this is how they were defending Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin, I was told, is not wrong. By having additional spending, creating additional demand, we're going to just gum up the system even more. And it's going to make inflation worse. It's going to make our backlogs worse. So we have to cut those poor people off at the knees because, well, I need my G.I. Joe with Kung Fu grip. I need it for Christmas now.
If that was true, then our gas prices would be a lot cheaper, right? Because we basically, when there was nobody driving anywhere last year, we basically cut down how much gas and oil we were producing, which is why now that we need more supply, we don't have it. And people are like, oh my God. So that's, again, it's the same problem. Plus you had that, snafu in the Suez. But other than that, this is part of the problem where Joe Manchin thinks that spending is the issue when the reality is we're not bringing in enough money because Joe Manchin doesn't want to tax anybody and he doesn't want to collect the taxes that are already owed to us.
It seems like somebody's on the wrong side of things. And then you see that this billionaire is going to hold a massive fundraiser for him, a Republican donor, because he thinks Joe's special. And you go, he is. He's the guy who got you massive tax breaks. It's crazy. It's crazy where we are. Speaking of crazy, have you seen this University of Austin thing that's come out? Evidently, they're creating a university. A bunch of conservative minds have said that they're waiting for the higher education system to repair itself, but they're wait no longer. They're creating this University of Austin, and they're doing it in Austin, Texas. And I love the rationale for choosing Austin, Texas. Not because the University of Texas is there and Austin's a college town and you'd have academic debate and all that stuff. No. Because podcaster Joe Rogan is from there.
This just seems like a promo for Joe Rogan. Like, is this going to be Joe Rogan College or something? They're just going to have it be the right-wing academy of broadcasting hate speech on the airwaves? Is that, I don't get it. It was funny. You told me about this and I had to look it up. I think this was one of, this broke one night when I was binge watching Nancy Drew or something. But yeah, like this whole school has decided it's going to have this, these classes of creationism and Herman Cain pizza cooking 101 or whatever, and you're not going to get a degree at all. So congratulations for this complete waste of your time and effort that will give you nothing.
But you'll be able to take a series of forbidden courses. There will be forbidden courses. I don't know what that means.
This is not like the soup course, right? Or the dessert course or the mouche bouche, right? This is BS course is what's happening here.
And the weird thing is while they're talking about being fiercely independent and free thinkers and pushing back against political correctness and all of this stuff, these are the same people who are talking about banning books. And in places like Texas and Virginia, there's even talk of burning books. Which is kind of hysterical.
That freaked me out. The thing about I always learned that with Fahrenheit 451 you teach it, you don't use it as a guide for your future. And so all of these amazing books that are from African American authors and LGBT authors are now somehow banned because nobody's actually read them, and they're just like, oh well, he's he's subversive. We can't have that author. And it's just absurd. It's really crazy. And it, you know, it goes back to, this has been going on for years and years and years. And I'm not surprised that, you know, we're transitioning from we're going to ban the books to we're going to burn them.
Yeah.
I say, let me know how that works out for you. I'll be there to take all of the pictures and make sure you're famous.
No, what's interesting to me, though, is, you know, a lot of these books, as you pointed, were on shelves. Nobody knew that they existed. The second they put them on a list, now you've got people going, hey, I guess I got to find out why they're on the list. And actually making them somewhat popular, which is hysterical, because as I understand, in Texas at least, some of their sales are going up.
Yeah, so one of the children's authors, Carrie, he's the guy who wrote this really sweet book called New Kid about a young black teenager who transitions from a public school to a private school, and it's this like fish out of water story about, you know, I'm in a new place and I've got to figure out what that world is like and how to, you know, operate in it. And there is nothing even remotely controversial in this book, and yet they've canceled his appearances in Houston, and they've pulled books off the shelves. So the sales, I guess, from the publicity of people talking about him and talking about his books, the sales of his books have just gone through the roof. And so now they're just, all of these anti-CRT people are just creating more interest over racial issues, which I wish that was sort of spread across the whole country. But, you know, it's not something that everybody is doing. But hey, buy more books like this.
There you go. Buy more books. If for no other reason than just mail them to the people, to the politicians in Texas.
Yes.
That's the way you go.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I can't believe they haven't banned the Starbelly speeches, you know, from Dr. Seuss yet. Like, that is one of those books that you would think that they would totally ban, and they just haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, it's crazy. Speaking of crazy, I want to go to Florida. Evidently, Ron DeSantis is new. Because this story's got my attention. You've written a story on Ron DeSantis' new Surgeon General, who evidently got his medical license approved in 2 days. How does that happen?
So this guy is super messed up. And this story, I can't believe it is not bigger than just the Florida papers, and very few people have been talking about it. And it should be like broadcast everywhere. Please, for the love of God, tweet and share this story. This guy, the new Surgeon General, is one of those guys from the frontline doctors, the American Frontline Doctors Group, which is the group that talks about how all of the viruses are made from alien DNA.
No way, not the demon sperm people.
Yes, it's the demon sperm people.
Oh my gosh.
So this guy worked for UCLA as a teacher for a little bit, and then started writing all of these articles after COVID, saying that he'd been working in the COVID units, and, you know, here's what he's experienced. Well, now it turns out that while UCLA won't confirm or deny anything, all of these people who worked with the guy were embarrassed by him. He is completely lying. He had nothing to do with the COVID task force. And then we found out again later this week that he not only got his medical license in Florida in 2 days, which is a process that usually takes 5 to 6 months, he was also given tenure at the University of Florida in 2 weeks. That never happens.
How?
It takes people years to get tenure.
Yeah, how?
And then, you know, then he becomes Ron DeSantis, Surgeon General. So I can't even, the amount of corruption going on here is just insane.
So let me ask the other question. Is the medical license real? I mean, is this something that came out of does he actually have a medical degree, or is this one of those crackerjack box, correspondent course? Does he actually have the credentials?
He apparently went to medical school. I haven't found out, you know, if he did residencies and stuff like that. I haven't figured that out yet. But yeah, the thing about the Florida Medical Board is all of the people that are appointed on the Florida Medical Board were appointed by Ron DeSantis. So of course they're going to approve any license that the governor tells them to, and they're going to do it, you know, lickety split. Whatever you say, Ron DeSantis.
Wow. Wow.
Corruption in Florida. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you go, yeah, I expect that.
Right?
Yeah, that I expect that.
And now Ron DeSantis is talking about how he wants to deport people from Florida to the rest of the country, and it's like, oh God, that happened tonight. This is what we're dealing with tonight.
Oh, God. Lord help us.
I know.
Help us. Let's get to some fun stories. The guy from New Jersey, the MMA fighter, what did he get? 41 months for punching a cop during the insurrection and all of the stuff that he did. Is that enough?
So much for the thin blue line, right?
Yeah.
So much for supporting law enforcement. I guess if you punch them, then you only get 41 months. The sleeper story in that story, though, is the lawyer. Look up a photo of this lawyer because it's the weirdest looking dude I've ever seen. He's got blonde dreadlocks because he's a white dude, and they're in a ponytail right on top of his head. And one thing that I really feel is that there is an age at which dreads are no longer cool for you and they become lame. And this guy has gone way past that level. And then there are pictures of him in like really tight neon green pants and hot pink tennis shoes. It's very strange. And he's standing by a DeLorean. This is a very strange dude. But, you know, this is the kind of case we're dealing with.
Yeah.
41 months and the weirdest lawyer I've ever seen.
Also, the QAnon shaman got 4 years, right?
Yeah, he got 44 months and he's been in for 10. They're asking for 4 years for the guy. I don't know if they're going to get granted. The hearing is on Wednesday. But the last time the Justice Department asked for the wrestler 44 months and they gave him 41. So, you know, they're at least in that same ballpark.
So is this where the sentences start getting progressively longer in terms? Because
I think so.
Because I hope so.
Because the shaman, so there was actual, you know, violence with the guy punching a cop. The shaman made it through the halls of Congress, broke into the Senate gallery, and then rappelled down and was around the dais and on the floor and everything. So this guy is like all over the cameras, all over the place, and was bragging about, you know, how amazing he is. That's a long time to be in prison for somebody who claims that he's a vegan, and then he has to have special food.
Oh, he's gonna get special food, all right.
Yeah, he's gonna get real special treatment. But now it's interesting. The latest thing that I've seen from him is that he's recanting everything and feels like he's been, lied to by Donald Trump and misled, and so he's come out of the cult and he's realized that, you know, he got hosed.
No, he's trying to save his own skin is what he's trying to do.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is where I go, where are those people in the Trump administration who have got to be looking around going, Trump's not going to do anything for us. It's time to cut bait and run, man. It's time to get the best deal they can get. And I'm waiting for that out of these subpoenas. I'm trying to figure out who it's going to be, but somebody's got to go, hey, screw this. I'm saving my own skin.
That's the weird thing, especially with people like Mark Meadows, Kylie McEnany, who is really young and has, you know, a future theoretically in politics. So you would think she wouldn't necessarily want to completely destroy her entire career by having a criminal contempt citation on there. Mark Meadows is the one, so he has to appear by tomorrow morning, or Congress is holding him in criminal contempt. Like, that's happening fast.
Good.
They're really starting to make this stuff happen fast. One of the things that I learned tonight is an amazing thing called inherent congressional contempt, which I encourage everybody to Google, and I will send a link from the Constitution Center about it. Basically, there is legal precedent for Congress sending an aide out to, or a cop out to arrest somebody and throwing them in the clink.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's actually, they've held people in criminal contempt before, but they've also brought people in and essentially arrested them and confined them because of this.
I always thought that's how it worked. I always
That's
thought
the way it should work. But now I've actually found the precedent for it and the case for it that went all the way to the Supreme Court. It's actually got a couple of times it's been challenged, and every time the courts have decided in favor of it. And it happened the last time in 1934. The Supreme Court said, absolutely, Congress is an equal branch of government. If they're passing criminal contempt charges, then they can bring people in and confine them for inherent congressional contempt.
because as I understand, they actually have a cell in the chamber. There's actually a place to put people in the chamber, and that's where they would go, as I understand.
Yeah, which I think would be fun to sort of like all cram them in there like a clown car. In 1934, they took the guy to the Willard Hotel, which I just think is absolute crap. I mean, come on, like at least take him to like the Motel 6 that's down the street. You know, they can deal with a much, you know, cheaper hotel on the taxpayer dime. But I think the jail on the bottom is even better, and then, you know, everybody, all the other members of Congress can gather around the jail and poke sticks at them and laugh at them. I think that'd be fun.
I think that would be fun. And you could live stream it, you know, maybe charge a little admission.
Yeah, we could pay down the national debt by charging admission to the live stream of the jail for Mark Meadows and Steve Bannon.
Maybe you could raise a little bit of money so we could pass that Build Back Better Act and help Granny get some new chompers. You know, there's a lot that could happen here. There's a lot of possibilities.
I love this idea. This is brilliant.
I've always been a big fan of pay-per-view when it comes to this stuff, especially if they can throw Steve Bannon in there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because putting Steve Bannon and Mark Meadows in the same confined space, I mean, that would be something everybody would want to watch.
I am right there with you. So lots of fun coming up, lots of things to look forward to. But Sarah, I appreciate you taking some time for us. As always, fabulous work. Keep it up, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
You as well, our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out their work over at RawStory.com. She, as I said, you know, one of my favorite reporters out there, talking about the important stories, like the QAnon shaman guy. Hopefully we'll see the inside of a jail for some time. Remember, check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any part of the program, grab the podcast, subscribe, tell your friends, share, do all of that stuff. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
You cannot now sit on your hands as the world asks you to act, because the world knows what a mess our planet is in.
Crunch time for negotiations at COP26 UN Climate Summit.
Now, the two largest economies in the world have agreed to work together to raise climate ambition in this decisive decade.
U.S. and China announce landmark collaboration on climate change action. Plus, many nations are underreporting their greenhouse gas emissions, new analysis finds.
All of that underreporting and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
One of the bill's major provisions includes $47 billion to withstand the devastating impacts of climate change. Okay, that's good. You know what would have been better? Billions of dollars to prevent the devastating impacts of climate change.
Yep. This is your Green News Report.
This is the equivalent of showing up to a car crash and handing out seat belts. There you go. You could have used one.
Okay, Desi Doyen, They got a whole lot to get done. There's a whole lot of countries that have to agree, and they don't have much time left.
No, they do not. It is crunch time in the final days of the COP26 UN Climate Summit in Glasgow, Scotland, with negotiators wrangling over technical mechanisms and language to shift the global Paris Climate Agreement from ambition to implementation. A notable development, an official draft agreement released on Wednesday pushes countries to set more aggressive goals sooner for cutting their emissions, and for the first time ever, it formally calls for phasing out the use of coal and ending government subsidies for fossil fuels.
What? They said that out loud? Coal and fossil fuels? What?
For the first time ever.
Yep.
Now, all nations must approve the text, so it could change, but just putting the words into an official UN document establishes a floor for negotiations going forward.
Just to give you an idea of how low the bar is.
And it does matter because, as Axios put it in an understatement, quote, the agreement that emerges from Glasgow will help determine what future people will experience for the next several decades.
Oh, is that all?
A new scientific analysis by the Washington Post finds that countries are already off course in meeting their Paris goals and identifies an enormous gap between what nations declare their emissions to be versus the greenhouse gases that they are actually emitting into the atmosphere. The UN attributes that partly to lack of consistent global standards for measuring and reporting, and those are now under negotiation to include verification to match countries' claims to the actual global numbers.
So, to keep them from lying.
Exactly. And new projections by monitoring firm Climate Action Tracker calculate that countries' short-term plans for this decade allow them to emit roughly twice as much in 2030 than would be consistent with meeting the 1.5 degrees Celsius aspirational goal under the Paris Agreement.
Oh, well, they tried.
The new analysis warns that even if governments meet their long-term pledges to cut emissions, unless everyone moves faster in this decade, the world is headed for a catastrophic 2.4 degrees Celsius of warming above pre-industrial levels.
Not good.
But some encouraging news.
Good.
The U.S. and China, the two biggest emitters in the world, issued a surprise declaration vowing to work together and to do more to cut their greenhouse gas emissions in this decade. The statement includes an agreement to close the emissions gap and do more to halt deforestation. And China agreed for the first time to address its growing methane emissions. In a press conference on Wednesday, U.S. Special Climate Envoy John Kerry said that while the U.S. and China have their differences, working together on climate change is imperative.
The expression that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Well, every step matters right now, and we have a long journey ahead of us.
I don't understand. Fox News and Republicans have been telling me for 2 decades that China would never agree to work on climate change.
Yeah, and they lied.
What?
Also, 6 major car makers and more than 100 companies, countries, states, and cities signed a pledge at COP26 to sell only zero-emissions vehicles by 2040 or 2035 in major markets. The deal covers 15% of the global car market so far and includes U.S. car makers Ford and GM, but the U.S., China, and Japan did not sign on.
Oh, they will.
Finally, a new report finds that here in the U.S., renewable energy is hacking away at fossil fuels' dominance on the U.S. electric grid. Wind and solar energy now make up nearly all new power generation being built in America, thanks to rapidly falling prices. It's still not fast enough to meet U.S. climate targets, but renewable energy deployment has quadrupled in the U.S. just over the last 10 years, and the rate of renewable energy deployment is accelerating year over year.
We will take what we can get. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So interesting quote today from Gene Simmons. You may know Gene Simmons as the bassist for the band Kiss. And I can't imagine how the Kiss Army is taking Gene Simmons' comment saying, quote, "I don't care about your political beliefs. If you walk among us unvaccinated, you are an enemy." He said, you don't have the right to go through a red light or smoke in a building. I hate this whole delusional evil idea that you get to do whatever you want because of your rights and the rest of the world be damned. This, I gotta wonder, because it's my view, most of the KISS army, I would think, would be the no, we're not getting vaccinated crowd. And to have the guy at the front with the blood coming out and all that saying you're the enemy, interesting times. Interesting times. Here to share some thoughts on those interesting times, I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you, Rick.
So, Gene freaking Simmons, you're an enemy. Right. If you're unvaccinated, you're walking among us, you're an enemy. Pretty strong words.
Right. He said he didn't want to catch the disease. I don't want to risk his life. The whole idea is delusional. Evil idea. You get to do whatever you want. I mean, they were pretty interesting and tough words, and he swiped at everybody that if you spread nonsense, Republican or Democrat, you're evil. And I thought that it was pretty interesting. Thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, and this may be the kind of stuff that we need. Somebody who is apolitical, because I don't see him on really any political side. I see Gene Simmons as a guy all about himself. But for him to come out and say something like this, does it matter? Will this matter?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the one disappointing thing, every week I do a coronavirus dashboard, I call it, and got this one radio show that really likes to go in depth, right, of the whole issue. And every week there's some positive things about, the virus, vaccination, et cetera. But the one thing that lingers is, if I think if I'm right today, 57% have had 2 shots.
Yeah.
57%.
That's it.
Really? And that's, so hopefully, if he's responsible, especially with the following he has, if he's responsible for getting, another 20,000 people vaccinated, fine. It's okay with me.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And look, the weird thing is this is a guy who said, look, I got vaccinated. You should. I look at the mouthpiece of the right, Fox News, and we know most of the people over at Fox News, if not all of them, have been vaccinated while simultaneously being the anti-vax mouthpiece. It's just, it's that say, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, is the hypocrisy just right out in front.
Right. Geraldo Rivera, in an article today, he slammed some of the news personalities. He was on one of the other shows, on Fox News for being vaccinated, but ignoring, that issue and encouraging viewers to, fight the mandate. And Geraldo pointed out, again, that's great. He works at Fox News, and he's pointing out, they're telling you can fight it, it ought to be freedom, quote, blah, 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 but yet, he points out they're vaccinated. Now, they could say, wow, it's our choice, but I don't know how, I got my booster today, and I don't know how you can be out there and then slamming everything, and then you go get it and say, but I don't want to really let you know I got my booster.
Yeah, or I'm immunized, whatever the hell that means.
Right.
What do you make of this Aaron Rodgers deal? Does he deserve the negative press he's getting?
I think so. For lying, you mean about the vaccination?
Yeah. No, I'm on the. I just wanted to get your thoughts. I think he should be suspended. This idea that he got a half an hour's worth of fine is kind of ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I know. I think in this case, he lied. He lied about being vaccinated, and on top of it, I think that I know it's not criminal under the law, but it's almost criminal intent. If he lies about that and he goes to a place and people come to see him and they have compromised immune situations and they think, they're fairly safe because he's vaccinated, even though they should take more precaution, I understand that, but I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
And especially a personality.
Yeah.
It's going to be out there amongst people.
But isn't this a moment where we start to have to come to this place where, okay, fine, if you're not going to protect yourself and you're not going to protect others, someone's got to hold you accountable when you spread this stuff. I mean, at some point, yeah, there's enough information out there. There's enough out there to say, look, because let me back up. I met a guy several weeks back who said, look, I'm never getting vaccinated. I've got some problems. It's a health thing, he says. He goes, but here's the thing. I wear the mask. I stay away from people. I do everything I can possibly do to not expose anyone else, not expose my family, my grandkids, anything. Not getting the vaccine, but I'm respectful of everybody else. I don't go into crowds. I don't do all this stuff. And I respect that on a certain level. Look, he's got some problems. I get that. My problem is the guy that I know who's going, the heck with you. I clearly don't care about myself. So what do you think I care about you? None at all. Something has to hold that person in some bit of accountability.
Well, I mean, I think so. Look, especially somebody who is, again, a personality. It's comparable to me where if Aaron Rodgers went to some event and, he says he's been vaccinated. Again, everybody needs to take precautions. I understand that. But he says he's been vaccinated. To me, it's the same thing as if I go to a nursing home and I apply for a job where I want to come in and see some people, and they say, "Are you vaccinated?" "Oh, yeah, yes, I am." It's the same thing. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that.
So where do you see this all going? I mean, at the end of the day, our court systems are so screwed up that, one day they allow the mandate, next day they block the mandate, next day it's, we can let, United Airlines have their mandate. Do you see this ever working itself out?
Well, this one's tough, and because, the question you asked is a time question. Do you ever see this working itself out? This is the problem with it. Let's take, for example, the state of Tennessee. The state of Tennessee has said it's basically not going to follow federal mandates, right? And they have, factories down there that are now arguing, amongst themselves internally, the company and the employees. Do you get vaccinated? Do you not? Do you violate Tennessee law? Can the employee say, I'm following Tennessee law, not the Fed? Another employee says, I'm following the Fed, not Tennessee. I want protected. And I think the time frame here is important because when trying to get more than the 57% vaccinated in this country, do we want to go through another? Let me ask you this: do we have a year to go through in court battles to clear this out?
I don't
think
so.
Do we really have a year? No.
No, I don't
really
think so.
Don't.
I
fear
public
health. It's a public health emergency, and I think that's the key part to it. So the court battles and the misinterpretations, et cetera, and the back and forth, it's simply not healthy at all.
And in the meantime, people are going to get sick and people are going to die.
Going to die. Right.
We live in really, really screwed up times.
Right, exactly.
Let's move along. Evidently, some more subpoenas the other day, 10 of them, Kayleigh McEnany, Stephen Miller, some other colorful names. The guy who was the head of the Office of Personnel Management. Interesting names. Will they testify?
Well, I think probably McEnany and Stephen Miller, if I'm going to look down that list, would fight the most. I want to see Stephen Miller, of all people, testify. I really do. Again, I compare him to one of the characters out of the Walking Dead. Not the ones trying to survive, the zombies, walking around. Stephen Miller is, I know this is not on the topic of the insurrection directly, but if anybody was ever responsible for messing up lives on this planet, it's Stephen Miller, due to his position, by the way, on legal, legal, immigration and what he has done around the world in these embassies. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
But I just wondered if anybody, and the reason I bring up Miller and I'm harping on him, Rick, is because if anybody had emails that said go get him, it would be Stephen Miller. If anybody.
No, they're absolutely right. The person that I want to see testifies is John McAtee. He was Trump's personnel director.
Right.
What we're now finding out is on the day of January 6th, The vice president and his security detail were locked out of the White House and out of basically everything that their key card would have gotten them into. I want to know who shut their key card off for that day and left them on a loading dock while a gallows was being built in D.C. with people chanting, hang Mike Pence. That's the testimony I want to get.
Good. That is a good point. Right.
Because, it's as I understand, this is a guy who could turn those passes off as the personnel director. Because how do they work in the morning and then, oops, didn't work throughout the day and then work later on? I don't know. And these are things that are just now dripping out, things that are just now coming around. And for me, if I'm Mike Pence and I'm remembering standing out on that loading dock, at some point, do you not go, hey, I got to spill the beans? Because look, he's never going to run for office again because the Trump people hate him for not doing what he was supposed to. And every other Republican hates him because he was with Trump. This guy's political future is done. So the best thing he can do for his legacy is come out and at least be honest, I think.
Right. Right. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, this whole vision of Mike Pence hiding in an underground parking garage, and this came out, I think it came out in a book, did it not?
Yeah, it was the Jonathan Karl book.
Yes, Jonathan Karl book, right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, but at some point, I'm so frustrated by these subpoenas because there's a lot of names on these subpoenas. We got 11, then 6, then now I guess 10 more. They've got all these subpoenas, and I fear that none of them have to sit in the hot seat and answer a question. And this is where you go, at some point, do we not just grab them and go, in the seat with you? Even if you plead the fifth on everything, you should have to sit your behind in that seat because I would have to if they subpoenaed me.
Well, right. Look, we would have to if they. Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I have a guy that does my drywall, right, and he witnessed some domestic violence out in the street, and he got a subpoena, and he called me up and he said, "I got a subpoena, for the court case." He wasn't involved in it. He saw it. He and his girlfriend. He said, "I got a subpoena." He said, I'm tied up that day. I've got to do something on and on. I said, "No, you have to go for that subpoena. You have to." And then I thought in my mind, unless you're Steve Bannon, and local court, state court, federal, I dare anybody to not answer a subpoena.
Yeah, and this is where.
Don't go to jury duty and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where you go. This is where people get frustrated with our system of there being two Americas. The America for all of us who, if you don't show up, they come get you and they throw you in the seat. And then those of the elites at the top who can, well, maybe not. Maybe we're not going to comply.
Well, this is the point in time, too. And by the way, this benefits Republicans if something ever gets turned around and they need to subpoena people, which they have tried for Benghazi, et cetera, things like that. But this is where they ought to clarify because the way they have designed this congressional system is flawed. Of course, it's flawed. Again, Congress should have the same power to require somebody to sit with a subpoena as you should in a court in Carnegie or Newark, Ohio, or wherever you're going to be.
I'm thinking about I'm sure you've seen it. There's that amendment to the Constitution that keeps running around. Was it the 28th Amendment or something that they keep sending around going, we need to ratify the 28th Amendment to make Congress abide by all the laws and and all of that stuff. This is a perfect moment for that. Yes, you should have to abide by all the laws like everybody else.
Yeah, my sister actually sent that to me, and I'm like, no, your nephew, my son, did not get free college. I mean, I went down the whole list of those things they send around, and there's a lot of falsehoods in them, but why don't they do something that's for real?
Yeah.
Exactly, and correct some of the privilege that exists for people out there when it comes to Congress and the subpoena. Again, if my drywaller has to answer a subpoena in a local city court or go to jail potentially, then so should Steve Bannon. They should just correct it.
I'm right there with you. And I'd pay for the plane ticket to put him in Guantanamo Bay.
Right. Why, do you hate those people that much?
I'm hoping that there's virtually nobody left there. Let's move along. Alabama on the map. Looks like Richard Shelby, who's retiring, is getting into the Senate race there. What's going on? What's going on there?
Well, there's some bigger repercussions too to this story. Yes, Richard Shelby, Senator Shelby is retiring, and he, like many candidates, has a lot of bling in their campaign accounts. So he's going to spend about $5 million in his campaign account, which he can do, and he's going to give it to a super PAC, and that super PAC is supporting Republican Senate candidate Katie Boyd Britt. And why that's a big deal, Katie Boyd Britt is running against the Trump-backed Congressman Representative Mo Brooks. So it's a battle of Trump versus Shelby, calling the establishment for this purpose. So it's well known that Senator supports her, and he's going to pump $5 million in there. Now, bigger picture here, I think, is if you take other races across the country at different levels, especially congressional, House, and Senate, and you start to see these primary battles of the Trump candidate versus the non-Trump candidate, and then money spent, that could be spent in general elections. And a fallacy in my mind, and I used to argue this with political experts for 24 years, when they say, well, a primary is so healthy, it just gets your people geared up. No, primaries are not good. Don't let anybody listening to this show that wants to run avoid a primary at all possible costs.
Yeah, well, the theory is, and this is what it's been thrown at me, you want a vigorous primary so you get all your dirt out in the primary so that your opponent in the general can't use it against you. And I'm going, yeah, but here's the thing. You get so badly bloodied in the primary that you don't get to run in the general.
Exactly. And so, Shelby's getting in there. He's fighting, quote, the Trump candidate. And then let's say that the Shelby candidate wins. What happens, with the Trump candidate, and do they go against, the winner of the primary? Are there hard feelings, or vice versa? If the Trump candidate, wins or loses, are there hard feelings? So these primaries and this amount of money spent can do nothing but help the Democratic side as long as they avoid primary battles.
Yeah, I was looking at that race, and I'm, going, which way will Alabama go? I mean, she seems to be a religious candidate. Let's go. I view her on the fringe, but okay, she's going to be the religious candidate. And Brooks, it just seems like a lunatic. So it's going to be evangelical versus crazy. Should be a fun race.
I kind of like that in handicapping the race. Yeah, evangelical versus the lunatic.
Is there a different way to put that? Because I can't think of another way.
No, I mean, if you look at Mo Brooks and the effort to overturn the election alone, I think it says a lot.
Yeah, he's a lunatic. I mean, that's all.
He's under scrutiny by the House Select Committee.
That's why he's trying to get into the Senate. Is that the deal? He's trying to escape the House to get to the Senate.
Well, everybody knows if you get into the Senate, everything slows down. We all know that.
Jeez, oh man. Crazy times. Last question I got for you. We're looking to Monday. Monday going to be the big signing ceremony for the infrastructure bill. I think that's a good thing. For me, I wish he'd have signed it last Monday, so we could have got some of the money out this week to start creating some of the jobs that we need to be created. But once that's signed, do you see that as the end of the Build Back Better plan, or do you see anything possible of getting anything in the other half of the push to get the soft infrastructure stuff done?
Well, I mean, I think that on its own, this infrastructure bill is going to be great. Of course, then it'll come down to, well, did you get the other bill or not? I still think that the Biden White House needs to promote and push and, get these projects out there, the shovel ready, I call it, and, get them going, the planning and everything, and keep on that. Buttigieg, as transportation director, needs to make sure the money keeps going. Don't let it bog down in the system. These can be month-by-month wins across the U.S. It's a good thing. So having said that, I think it's decoupled, though, from I think it now has nothing to do with the second bill, the human infrastructure bill. This is going to be a matter of sitting down with 2 U.S. senators. And I know people hate to hear this. It's a democracy. We don't need to do this. Yes, sitting down with 2 U.S. senators, pinning them down, saying, how far do we go? Where can we go? Tell us now.
Yeah.
Don't let this bleed out week by week. Find out where they're at, and then pass something and take the victory on it. It's going to be a rough process if they don't.
It is most certainly something we need. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Make sure you got thoughts, questions, comments you want Bob to talk about? Shoot me an email, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I got to take a quick break right here. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1887. That was the day that Louis Ling died in prison while awaiting execution for his alleged role in a bombing at a workers' rally at Haymarket Square in Chicago the year before. Louis was born in Germany. His father worked for a lumber mill. One day, while trying to clear a log jam, his father fell into an icy river. Although Louis's father lived, he could no longer carry the same workload. The company fired him despite his 20 years of service. Louis began to question a labor system that would let this happen. He became a carpenter's apprentice. Louis then traveled to Switzerland, where he became acquainted with anarchist worker groups. Finally, in 1885, Louis made his way to the United States and Chicago. There he joined the Carpenters and Joiners Union. He became an outspoken advocate for the cause of the 8-hour workday. The movement had great success in Chicago, and on May 1st, or May Day, thousands marched in the streets for the 8-hour cause. When a bomb was thrown at a workers' rally 3 days later, the backlash against the labor movement was swift and brutal. 8 men, including Louis Ling, stood trial and were convicted despite a lack of evidence tying them to the bombing. Louis Ling and 4 others were sentenced to death by hanging. But the day before the sentence was to be carried out, Louis lit a cigar in his prison cell. The cigar was packed with explosives. The explosion left Louis in agony for hours before he finally died. Some believe he committed suicide rather than die at the hands of the legal system. Others believe he was murdered. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is interesting. Ken Land gone. Republican billionaire. This is why I have very little hope that the Build Back Better plan is going to move forward, because you got this billionaire, Republican billionaire funder, who has hosted fundraising events for Joe Manchin. Wednesday was on Squawk Box, said that he said he doesn't see leadership any place in this country. Thank God for Joe Manchin. He says, I'm going to have one of the biggest fundraisers I've ever had for him. He's special. He's precious. He's a great American. Because according to Langone, he had the guts and courage to not allow children to get, pre-K, to not allow kids to get a free associate's college degree. He voted against Granny getting chompers and hearing aids and glasses. He's special. He's precious because he voted against child care. because he voted against helping Granny stay in her home with home health care aides. Yeah, Joe Manchin's special, all right. And again, what kind of special? What kind of special are we talking about? Ultimately, someone like Langone, it's about the money. It's about the power. He got his tax breaks. He got what he wants. But for working people in this country, nope, can't have it. Can't have it. So he's going to hold one big old honking fundraiser for Joe Manchin. And you go, this is exactly what's wrong with our political system. Because everything in that Build Back Better plan, that the extreme right, the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Lauren Boeberts and that clan, everything that they see in this bill is socialism, it's communism, it's ismism. Because they're not smart enough to really care about anybody else. But when you talk to the individual voters, and I've had these conversations with Republican voters, they need help. They need the help in rural communities. They need the help in small suburban towns. They need the child care. Their kids need the ability to go on and get that 2-year college degree because they're struggling. They need what's in this plan. They need what was in it too. And what it would also do is it would give us that ability to undo, some of the last, 40 plus years of horrible policy. The people who talk about family values are the first ones to want to handcuff your ability to actually help your family. If you really truly were the party of family values, you would have voted for this stuff already. It's really kind of insane. If you truly are the pro-life party, create an environment where families want to bring children into this world. And then abortion solves its own problem. We're just in the worst, weird kind of world. And yet the wealthy in this country, they've got tons of money. They got the kind of money that, hey, they can just waste away and spend away in the hopes that, maybe they won't notice. Maybe they're too busy working 2 and 3 jobs to notice. And finally, John Deere, the strike at John Deere is now entering its 5th week as the workers turned down the initial offer overwhelmingly, more than 90%. And the second offer was a 55-45 vote. Well, now the National Republican Senatorial Committee is jumping in the middle of it and trying to divide the workers at John Deere from the farm workers. So all the people who work in these farms, the Republican Senatorial Committee, they're trying to pit the farmers against the workers. And as I'm reading through the story about how they're going to reach out to these people, and they cited this entire paragraph from the Iowa Field Report, alleging that the strike had gone too far, too long, all that stuff, inflicted trauma on one of America's most important demographics, the family farm. And I'm reading through this article, I'm going, but wait a second. Maybe read the room, because I know some farmers who are really ticked at John Deere. I've read stories of farmers who were apoplectic over what John Deere has done to them, because farmers like to believe, hey, they're gonna fix their own stuff. They're individuals. That whole thing. And I respect that. Well, John Deere says you can't work on their tractors. The software proprietary. You have to use their people. So if something needs to be done, you've got to use their certified people. You don't think the farmers are ticked off about that? So for me, there's a moment here where you go, the farmers and the workers have a common enemy. A company that is overreaching, a company that's tyrannical. There's an opportunity for farmers and factory workers to go, hey, we've got a common enemy. What's that whole thing? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah, this is that. So I think the Republican Senatorial Committee overreaching a little bit, trying to cause trouble where there is none, trying to start a fire where there isn't one. And I'll tell you, I'm hoping there's a moment where they go, you know what? We are all in this together, and maybe we should all say something about it. So going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you're going. As always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter. The Facebook thing is there as well. Go do that. YouTube, by all means, hit the subscribe button and get the notifications. Hit the little bell to get notified. Lots of good stuff. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.